This is Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan. Hi, everybody. For an episode that attempts to explore what may be possible or impossible in the quest for that elusive result known as peace in the Middle East, a phrase that especially now seems to be the very definition of hopelessness. We have Israel seeking to destroy Hamas. We have Hamas seeking to destroy Israel. And where does it go from there? If it is not going to end in an endless and escalating war where one side utterly destroys the other, how does resolution come about? It would have to involve both sides at some point deciding to stop, deciding to negotiate, deciding to compromise. And how realistic a scenario is that? In this debate, that is the question we are going to explore. And we are phrasing it around this particular question: can Israel make peace with Hamas? Let's meet our debaters. I first want to welcome Cenk Uygur. Cenk is the host, founder, and CEO of The Young Turks, which is one of the largest online news shows in the world. You were previously, Cenk, you were the host of MSNBC Live. You've also appeared as a commentator on CNN, ABC, NPR, Al Jazeera, and Fox. You've been a vocal advocate for ceasefire since early in the war. You're going to be answering yes, that Israel can make peace with Hamas. Thanks so much for joining us on Open to Debate.
Thank you.
And I want to welcome on the other side, answering no to that question, Mosab Hassan Yousef. Mosab, you are the son of a Hamas co-founder. You grew up surrounded by the forces and the politics of Hamas before you started working with Israeli intelligence to help bring the organization down. Mosab, you are also the author of the New York Times bestseller, Son of Hamas, as well as the newly published memoir, From Hamas to America. Thanks so much for joining us on Open to Debate.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get to our opening statements and what we have in answer to our question. Can Israel make peace with Hamas? Is one debater answering yes and the other answering no. Cenk, you're up first. Your answer is yes. Here's your chance, please, to tell us why.
Yep. So can Israel make peace with Hamas? Of course. That's who you make peace with, your enemies, not your allies. This is actually pretty elementary. No matter how bad the enemy is, at some point, if you want to get to peace, and that's a big if, then you're going to have to do it with your enemies and not allies. So if Israel wants to do a peace deal with Norway, that's not really going to help them. They can get there pretty quickly, but that's not the issue at hand. They're fighting Hamas. That's who they have to negotiate with, and that's who they have to get to an agreement with. And sometimes when you reject out of hand any discussions at all, under the rubric of we don't talk to evil, it turns into a disaster. Why? We know it already happened. Dick Cheney said that after 9/11 and our invasion of Iraq, Iran actually offered to completely eradicate their uranium program and wanted to get to the negotiating table with us. And they had a terrific offer, according to the reporting at the time from mainstream media news sources. And we didn't even get to find out what it was because Dick Cheney had this insane idea that you don't negotiate with your enemies. Well, then who do you negotiate with? It's absurd. Honestly, this is one of the easiest questions of all time. If you say you don't want to negotiate with Hamas, all you're saying is, I don't want peace. I prefer permanent war. So when you look at the idea from a different perspective and you say, well, okay, some things are so evil and terrible, and Hamas is, that you can't possibly negotiate with it. Well, under that same rubric and logic, you could certainly argue that you shouldn't negotiate with Israel. They've killed 35 times the number of civilians that Hamas did in this conflict. Imagine if Hamas had killed 35 times the number of civilians Israel did. So that would be a giant number. What are we talking about? Nearly 1 million people if you took the 40,000 people that Israel has killed in Gaza and multiplied it by 35. And you could say, oh my God, Israel, I can't believe how awful they are. And their civilian casualty rates are as bad as Hamas's. Hamas on October 7th was terrible. I condemn it 100%. My heart breaks for every civilian who's killed. I'm the one guy who's consistent on this. I don't want any Israelis killed. I don't want any Palestinians killed. And so as terrible as that Hamas attack was, well, their kill ratio was 71%. They killed 815 civilians and 1,139 people overall. They killed a lot of soldiers as well. Now, none of that excuses any of their actions. But when you look at Israel's kill ratio, if you assume that every man in Palestine that they killed is a terrorist, which is an absurd, unconscionable assumption, Israel still had a civilian kill ratio of 60%. So when you include the innocent men, that's going to be a higher kill ratio of civilians as a percentage than Hamas. So under this logic, the Palestinians should say Israel is so evil that we cannot negotiate with them. All right, now we're at a standstill. Nobody's negotiating with anyone. This is absurd. This is not how you get to peace negotiations. And can peace negotiations work? Of course. You know who's it's worked for before? Israel, when they negotiated with Egypt. And at the time, the hardliners, just like today, said, oh, you can never trust Israel. Israel led the invasion of Israel. Egypt led the invasion of Israel twice. They were the leader of the Arab nations. They want to kill us. They're so anti-Semitic. They want to kill all the Jews. You can't negotiate with the Egyptians. They'll never follow through on any of their agreements. Well, it's been decades and decades, and they totally followed through. There was no bombing afterwards. Peace worked. It's actually very elementary. You make peace with your enemies and then see if it holds. That is what has been done every single time. It's absurd to think otherwise.
Thank you, Cenk. And now, Mosab, it is your turn. Again, you are answering no to the question, can Israel make peace with Hamas? Your chance to tell us why, please.
Well, absolutely not. Why? Because Hamas is not a political movement. Hamas is an ideological movement that wants to destroy Israel to build an Islamic state. And they don't stop there. Their political ambition, their religious ambition is beyond the river and the sea. They want a global khilafah. So how can you satisfy such ambition? The situation with Egypt, with Jordan was completely different. Israel has no problem negotiating and making peace with the Arab world. Since its establishment, Israel extended its hand to make peace with the Arab world, but the Arab world rejected. Then the foundation of the Palestinian narrative is sitting on air because, first of all, there was no such thing as Palestine. If you look at Palestine, it's only an ideology, a very violent ideology. And it took the PLO 40 years to try to destroy the state of Israel, since 1948 until the early 90s, trying to destroy the state of Israel. Then they learned the lesson that violence was a dead end. And this is when Yasser Arafat came to negotiations, and Israel had no problem negotiating with Yasser Arafat. But what happened later? We had a new generation of Palestinians, Islamists this time, not the nationalists. And that's Hamas. And now they brought us back to square number one. And even Yasser Arafat and the other Palestinian first generation told Hamas, will it take you 40 years to realize that we're going nowhere? We cannot destroy Israel? And Hamas has been trying for the past 36 years, repeating the same mistakes of the PLO and Yasser Arafat. And Israel is caught up in this situation. Tomorrow we will have the communists coming. Then after that we will have more globalists, and could be any other foreign entity using the Palestinian cause as a device to just keep trying to destroy the only Jewish state on earth. So bottom line, Israel has no problem negotiating with Arabs, making peace with Arabs. Arabs are an ethnic group, and we have no problem. There are 2 million Arabs living in Israel. They are equal citizens, and they can get along with the Jewish people. But the problem that we're having, that Israel cannot coexist with destructive ideologies such as Palestine and Hamas, because those ideologies are black holes, and nobody can satisfy their ambitions.
Thank you very much, Mosab. We're going to come up to a break, but before we do, I want to pinpoint where you each see this disagreement lying by just asking you very, very briefly in 1 or 2 sentences to tell me what you see as your opponent's weakest argument point. Cenk, why don't you go first?
Yeah, this idea that you can't negotiate with people whose ideology you don't agree with, or you might even hate. So what? I don't care about their ambitions or ideology. I care about what do they agree to in a deal. And so if you said it that way, Well, look, then I would say I'm going to eliminate the settlers. The settlers' ideology is that they own the land, God gave it to them. I think they're a bunch of lunatics, and I think that they've oppressed the Palestinians. I think their ideology is toxic. But of course, I would negotiate with them.
All right.
Who else am I going to
Let me
negotiate
stop you
with?
there. And same question to you, Mosab. What did you hear from your opponent that you think is his weakest point?
Look, he's representing Hamas as a resistance movement that can be negotiated with. And I say Hamas is a Nazi ideology, worse than a Nazi ideology. And the leagues, the allies, did not negotiate with the Nazis. They killed millions of the Nazis. They destroyed Germany. And this is how we got eventually for a global peace.
Okay, I'm going to break in so that we can take time for our break. When we come back, we're going to go further into our question, can Israel make peace with Hamas? And if you're enjoying this debate, I want to let you know you can listen to hundreds more at opentodebate.org. Recent topics that we've taken on include things like, should Trump's convictions stand? Is Islam anti-Semitic? And is it okay to pay for sex? Many, many more. Please take a listen. I'm John Donvan. This is Open to Debate, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan. We've got over 300 additional debates that you can dig into by going to our website, opentodebate.org. You can look at our special election series and many, many other topics. Today we're taking on the question, can Israel make peace with Hamas? Our debaters are Cenk Uygur, who is host of the news commentary show The Young Turks, and Mosab Hassan Yousef, who is author and son of a co-founder of Hamas turned Israeli informant. In listening to your opening arguments, what I'm hearing you say, Cenk, fundamentally is that, yes, you can make peace with your enemy because making peace with anybody else doesn't make sense, and that it has happened multiple times, including in the example of Israel having made peace with Egypt and additionally with Jordan and with the PLO in the 1990s. And you're saying that there's no reason that that can't happen again. Mosab, you're saying there's very much a reason that can't happen again. You're saying that Hamas is a different kind of organization, that its ideological motivations make it a distinctive kind of challenge for negotiation, unlike the PLO, which was a nationalist organization, that the Islamists are fired by religion and have aspirations that would not be satisfied by any kind of negotiation. And I want to take the question to you, Cenk. The fundamental point that Mosab is making is that Hamas is different, that it's not just that they have these goals of completely destroying Israel, is that they're fired by religion, that those things can't be moved, that it's an ideological, not a nationalist kind of organization. What about that?
Yeah, it's as if we haven't lived in the world. There's been extremist ideologies throughout history, and we've eventually had to negotiate with all of them. And the reason we were at war or conflict, different civilizations and nations, is because they were extremists, and that's who usually sometimes creates conflict. So that's who you have to negotiate with. So I'll give you many examples. Shia and Sunni extremists in Iraq. We wound up negotiating with them at different times in our occupation of Iraq because that's who was bombing us. And so if you want to talk about extremist ideology, imagine if Hamas thought, hey, you know what? Not only should we capture the Jews, but we should keep them. And every once in a while, if they don't obey us, we should rip their skin off them. And maybe we should hang them by a noose and then burn them and sell their babies and rape their women, all their women. You know who believed in that ideology? The slave owners in the South, the Confederacy here in America believed in that. And that was so extreme that if somebody was doing it now, you would say, you can't possibly negotiate with those people. Those are the worst people on earth.
Okay, let's see your response to that.
Look, if somebody want to cancel my right to exist, I will never sit down on the table with them and give them any form of recognition. There is no dialogue with someone who wants me to cease to exist. End of the story. Hamas wants the destruction of Israel. They don't want the land. They don't care for the land. It's basically like someone entering the negotiating room and saying, let's negotiate. But after this, I'm going to shoot you in the head. So what's the point of the negotiations? If tomorrow you're going to kill my children, if the day after you're going to attempt to annihilate me, so then what's the point? Israel tried many times to extend their hand. For example, my father was one of those people. in the prisons and outside the prisons, abroad, to find a common ground with Hamas. But Hamas totally rejected the existence of the State of Israel. The best they could offer to the negotiating table, a truce that is limited to 10 years. This is what they offered Israel, that we give you a truce for 10 or 15 years, but after that, we don't know what we will do. What kind of negotiations is this? What type of dialogue is this?
Okay, so first of all, the right to exist, I find this to be the most ironic point that the Israeli side makes. So they say, we are not allowing Palestine to exist. We've occupied them for 57 years. And now Netanyahu's government says, I will never allow them to exist. And then turns around in the next sentence says, can you believe they don't want us to exist? I mean, that's patently absurd. You do exist. There's nothing they could do about your existence. You're backed by the largest military in the history of humanity. But meanwhile, you are literally preventing the state of Palestine from existing. And then you say that is such an evil concept that you cannot even negotiate with it. But that's the concept that you not only believe in, but you're in the middle of doing right now. And nevertheless, I would negotiate with Israel. Even though they have prevented the Palestinian state from existing, even though they have oppressed and occupied, and then this whole idea of, oh my God, these people are uniquely anti-Semitic. What did you think was going to happen? I hate that they're anti-Semitic, but if you occupy someone for 57 years, did you think they were going to love you? And then go, oh yes, oh, you know, after 57 years of brutal occupation and humiliation and endless slaughters, oh, I expected them to love the Jews. And if they don't, then I'm never going to speak to them. I'm never going to allow them to have a state. But my God, my feelings are hurt because the other side also doesn't want me to exist. It's patently absurd. The only reason you would say crazy things like that is if you never wanted a peace deal in the first place.
Well, so you're building your argument on the false narrative of occupation.
Okay.
So this whole story of occupation and the victim mentality and why they are entitled for revenge and inflicting pain on Israel and destruction on a peaceful communities because they have been occupied. But then we say, did Palestine ever exist? No, it didn't. It was not a country. It's not a people. It's not an ethnic group. It's not a race. It was just a colonial entity created by the British. Then it was terminated in 1948 when the Jews had the right to declare their independence. They did, but the Arabs refused. There weren't Palestinians at that time. The Palestinians were Jews, Arabs, Druze, Christians, everybody who lived in that territory during the colonial era. All of them were called Palestinians. It's created by the British. It was not a country. It was not like an ethnic country, an Arab country that was called Palestine. So if this is the truth of the situation, then there is no such thing as occupation. Yeah. And the entire tale that you are building on the occupation allegation is false.
So
Yeah.
we're not strictly debating whether the occupation exists or is real as defined by most of the world, but I do think that the point requires a comeback.
Yeah. So thank you for proving my point. So you said, well, we can't negotiate with Hamas. They don't even recognize our right to exist. And then you turn around and said the Palestinians don't exist anyway. Palestine doesn't exist.
I said Palestine
the occupation
as a country
doesn't exist. Nothing exists. Who cares? They're
Arabs
dirt.
exist.
Okay. So you, and by the way, you're wrong. You said that I think that the Hamas is allowed to inflict pain. I never said that. I've never said that. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's the right strategy. I think the right strategy is diplomacy, civil disobedience, going to the United Nations just like Israel did. Right. But this idea that there is no occupation, it makes you guys sound like you live in an alternate reality. The rest of the planet realizes there's an brutal, horrible occupation of 5.5 million people. It's happened for 57 years. I don't know what version of the multiverse you guys live in where you think that's not an occupation. Are they having a picnic? Do they look like they're happy? What do we do with those 5.5 million people? Do we make them citizens of Israel? Okay, no problem. I don't like that idea because I think it would wipe away the Jewish state. I don't want that for Israel. I want it to be a safe haven for Jews. But if you either make them part of the state, or you give them their own state, or you say, no, you're my prisoners, you're my hostages for the rest of time, and I'm just going to make sure you never have any democracy. I could bomb you anytime I want. I could cut off your water, power, electricity. I can make sure your children starve to death, but it's not an occupation. Do you have any idea how absurd that sounds?
Well, I think your narrative is absurd because you choose to be in denial. I just told you that there was no country of Palestine. Excuse me, this is very important.
All right.
I admit that there are Arabs as ethnic group in that land, and Israel has no problem of negotiating and giving them independence. But the problem, every time they were offered a state in 1948, in 1993, in 2000, they refused. There was no occupation in Gaza. There is no occupation in the West Bank. This occupation.
Mosab, let me ask you to get us back on point. How does this point strengthen your argument that Israel cannot negotiate with Hamas?
Look, false narrative, and this is, by the way, just a war of narratives, will lead eventually to violence. And when people believe that they are Palestinians, and we ask them why are you a Palestinian? What makes you a Palestinian? But they don't know how to answer that. It's just a syndrome. It's a mental disease. It's a mental illness.
Can you imagine if I said being Jewish is a mental disease? I mean, that's so offensive.
Jewish
what are
is
you?
an
You were born a
ethnic.
Palestinian.
Okay,
what are you?
Okay, Jewish is an ethnic group. It's a religion. It's a culture. It's a nation. Palestine and Palestinian is an ideology. It was born just yesterday. Judaism was born 5,000 years ago. It's the most ancient nation on the planet.
What are
What
you?
are you talking about? What is Palestine? What is
are you?
Palestinian?
What are you?
I am an Arab. I was born in Judea, an Arab. This is my ethnicity. This is my language. Okay, Palestinian. This is something made up by Yasser Arafat,
where
an
do you want
Egyptian
your
con
brethren
artist.
to go? Where do you want your brethren? Where do you want 5.5 million people to go? Do you want them just to stay as prisoners? Do you want them to be ethnically cleansed into a different country? What do you want to happen to them?
Of course, we don't want this. Israel has 2 million Arabs, and Israel
So what
did not
do you
have.
want them to do with the 5.5 million Palestinians?
As long as they carry this violent ideology, we're going nowhere. I would like for the Arabians to remember who they are and drop this Palestinian ideology so they are able to see things for what they are
you call
and
it
be
Palestinian, you call it Arab, you can call it anything you like. But the bottom line is there's 5.5 million human beings there that believe that it's not that they believe, they do not control their own sovereignty. They don't have independence. They can't control their borders. They think they are occupied by their enemies, which is empirical fact. What do you want to do with them if you don't want to do peace?
You need to ask what they need to do in order to achieve.
Oh, we have to so they have to please their occupiers.
No.
Okay, let me please you oppressors of mine.
No.
I would love to, I'm begging you. I will pass all of your tests.
Cenk,
Okay, they
Cenk,
need to drop violence.
One moment.
This is what they need
One
to do.
moment, because we're going a little bit both off point and in circles at the same time. But if Mosab is making the point that Hamas would have to do something, that goes back to negotiating with your enemy. That there would be an expectation on Israel's part that Hamas would concede something, and vice versa. Is that not going directly to your argument that that's the way things have to go if it's not going to just be all-out war?
So first of all, this idea of preconditions, I don't agree with to begin with, but Israel's not even saying that. Israel's not saying, hey, here's precondition 1 and 2. They're saying, Netanyahu at this point is saying, I will never give the Palestinians a state. So he is not a partner for peace. If I believe the same thing Mosab did, I would say never negotiate with Israel. Just go straight to war and violence, because they say they're never going to allow you to exist as a state. But I don't believe that. So for example, I'm a progressive. I can't stand Donald Trump. But when Donald Trump went and talked with Kim Jong-un with no preconditions, I agreed. I said that is the correct thing to do. Now that's a communist dictator who has concentration camps, the most oppressive nation on earth, even beating Bashar al-Assad and Benjamin Netanyahu. Nevertheless, I agree that you do negotiations with no preconditions, because that's what you do with your enemies. And that's always the situation you're in. I don't have to negotiate with Finland because they're not my enemy.
The other thing you can do with your enemies is utterly destroy them.
That's right.
World War II ended with the enemy utterly destroyed. Is that the only outcome here in terms of Hamas? Mosab, does Israel have to destroy Hamas?
No,
and
not just Hamas, all the Palestinians.
Well, no, my question right now is Hamas. And there is a distinction.
The what so-called Palestinian people, as long as they adapt violence as a way to achieve their political agendas, they are going to suffer. They are going to make others suffer.
You're talking about Hamas.
And I'm talking about not only Hamas, I'm talking about Islamic Jihad, Public Front, and 10 other gang movements that have been adapting violence against the Jewish people only for being Jewish. And as long as we have this violent Palestinian ideology, that includes Hamas, the Islamists, and the communists, the war will continue. The moment Palestinians drop violence as a mean to achieve their goals, then I think coexistence is possible.
My question was if they don't, is the only alternative for Israel to attempt to destroy Hamas, and can it?
Well,
I
they
mean,
already
that's
did
their
that.
stated.
This is where we're at right now. This is where we're at right now, and this is why Gaza been turned into rubble. And there is no way around destroying Hamas. And I think if there is going to be any other radical extremist Palestinian movement that will continue to adapt violence and pose a threat to the existence of the state of Israel, then they will be eliminated as well.
Same question to you. Can Hamas be destroyed? Is that an achievable, worthy goal?
Yeah. So first of all, Mosab just said that as long as they continue to do violence, there's such an anathema to the idea of peace that we shouldn't even talk to them. Again, by that logic, no one should ever talk to Israel. Israel's dropped 2,000-pound bombs over and over. They've dropped over 100,000 bombs in an area the size of Las Vegas. They have been way more violent than Hamas. If that hurts your feelings, I'm sorry, but those are clear facts, not even close. They are 10,000 times more violent than any Palestinian resistance because, and I'm not saying that the Hamas wouldn't be just as violent, if not more violent. They just don't have the capacity for it. Israel does, and they execute that violence all the time. If we eliminate people based on that, you would literally never have any peace negotiations ever. And then the idea of Hamas has to be completely eradicated. That is a purposely unachievable objective. Who comes out and says, okay, Hamas is now officially done? There is no such thing. No one could ever say that. And you could see we had America, Egypt, Qatar, Hamas, a huge portion of the Israeli cabinet, even the IDF leaking to the press saying, we're all ready for a ceasefire. The only people that held it up were Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir. And so those people are saying, hey, you know what? I want to continue to do violence, so I'm going to make the standard that you can never, ever match. How do we know if Hamas is all dead right now? We don't know anything. They keep making up numbers. They say, oh, we had killed 15,000 Hamas members. Then they went down to 9,000. Then they went back up to 14,000. So how do we know when they're all dead? And if you're trying to kill all of Hamas, well, you're going to have to kill a lot more than 40,000 Palestinians. Are we willing to do what we did in World War II, use nuclear weapons? Are we willing to firebomb as we did in Dresden and in Tokyo? That makes us monsters. Why would you want Israel to be monsters? Why don't you want them to have a beautiful independent state of Israel and a safe haven for Jews and a beautiful independent state of Palestinians? The idea that the Palestinians are the unique people on earth that cannot get to peace, that they are so violent, they have such a savage ideology they can't get to peace, is both racist and absurd.
So I hear Mosab saying that Israel really doesn't have a choice, and you're saying Israel has a choice.
Of course they have a choice.
Does Israel have a choice?
Look, what Hamas did on October 7 was barbaric, was a genocide motivated by sick religion. They attempted to ethnically cleanse a race, a human race. And this is a capital crime that cannot be forgiven. The situation to legitimize such a movement, give them legitimacy, and after that, in fact, to sit down on the negotiating table, then reward them with a state and political gain and financial gain. This is exactly what they wanted. Hamas, on October 7 in the morning, they killed Jewish children for revenge. In the afternoon, they killed Arab children, their own children. And by the way, this is a Palestinian practice to sacrifice their own children for political and financial gain. This is the essence of their game. And I am a living example. If you look at me, when my father had to choose between his Hamas Palestinian ideology and his own son, he chose the non-existential. He chose Allah over his son. And this is a living example to show you how these people function. They are willing to sacrifice not only 40,000 Gazans, they are willing to sacrifice an entire region religiously for something that does not exist. So with that said, Israel has no choice. It's not only about the children and the civilians of Gaza. It's about also the future of an entire generation in the Middle East. And I don't think there is a way around eradicating Hamas and removing them from power. We may suffer right now, and the Gazans may suffer, but the future will be bright without, at least brighter without Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, he did this ode to children, and I agree. 34 kids were killed on October 7th. That's heartbreaking. 15,000 Palestinian children have been killed.
They killed every child they found on October 7. If they found 10,000 children, they would have killed 10,000 children.
Okay.
It is not about head count.
Okay, so I'm not excusing a single child that Hamas killed, but it seems like you're saying, 15,000 Palestinian kids. So what? Israel had to do it. We have to eradicate Hamas.
Don't put words in my mouth. Don't put words in my mouth. And don't think that you hold the higher moral ground.
I do.
Those are my children. Those are my brothers and my sisters. And you are not. Don't pose as the one you care more. You don't care more than I do for the Palestinian children or for the Arab children.
All right.
The reason why are they suffering? This is the most important thing.
Mosab, and
You
Cenk,
don't mind that
Cenk,
Israel just murdered
one moment,
15,000
Cenk. Cenk, I'm going to pull moderator prerogative moment. Let's just take a breath and take it down 10 degrees. I understand you're both riled because you both care about this.
Okay. So there is no need to take the higher moral ground. You know, here I speak on behalf of the Arab and the Jewish children.
You've made your point.
They are
You've made your
very
point. You've made your
important to
point
me.
effectively and passionately.
I'm not being selective, and I don't need him to put words in my mouth.
15,000 children at a minimum are dead, and you're saying keep going.
Why? Why are they dead?
You're saying keep going.
Why are they dead?
So more children, thousands
Why
more
the
children.
children of Gaza are dead? Answer the question.
So it's not because of the Israeli bombs, right? Israel made, the Hamas made the Israelis kill the Palestinian children. It's always the Palestinians' fault. Always, right? You said the Palestinians don't even exist, and you say that you were looking out for them. You were an Israeli spy, right?
I said Palestine does not exist. I did not say Arabs don't exist.
Okay, but you're claiming that you care about the Palestinians, but you were an Israeli spy. And you said your father sold you out. Didn't you sell out your dad? I'm not saying you shouldn't have. I get why you did it, but you sold him out. He didn't sell you out. You were the traitor.
So basically right now you're just going on a personal attack. Let me ask you this question.
No, because I'm addressing what you said.
I want to answer you.
Okay.
If you had information about a suicide bomber that is about to kill people indiscriminately, would you report them to the authorities?
I didn't blame you for what you did. I said
answer the question, yes or no. Would you report it?
Of course I would report a terrorist attack.
Would that make you a traitor?
Well, it depends on the situation. But when you
right.
said that your dad sold you out, that's just not true.
Okay. I'm going to step in again because it has gotten personal. I understand you're both feeling it, and that's just not what we do here. We want to keep it on the points. So okay. I understand feelings have been hurt.
Yeah, but then I need to answer his question. I need to answer his question.
I want to move on from that question because we're gonna keep going in that direction in circles. Fair enough.
But can I answer the
I got to pull this and move on. Okay, very briefly, I want to go to a question that just comes out of the news, and it's the fact that Hamas has a new leader. Yahya Sinwar has taken over. He was the architect of the October 7th attacks, or certainly is given credit for that after the assassination of Haniyeh. I just want to get your take on whether that changes in any way the dynamic for the possibility of any kind of negotiated settlement between Israel and Hamas, which you say have been saying is theoretically possible, you're saying is impossible, but does that change the calculation whatsoever?
See, this is why I don't think, well, it's not that I don't think that Israel wants peace, and we should distinguish between the people of Israel and the government of Israel. I believe the people of Israel do want peace. I think that they're greatly misguided these days about how to get there. They believe that just killing more Palestinians might get them there. It's never, ever going to get them to peace. It's going to get them to more war. But their government is very clear. And one of the ways that they have prevented peace is they just killed Ismail Haniyeh, who was the moderate within Hamas. Now you can say, oh, no, Hamas has no moderates. They're all Nazis.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. But every movement has somebody who wants to get to peace, wants to do a negotiation, is more moderate relative to their movement, right? And Haniyeh was that guy. And Israel knew that. So they killed the moderate, leaving more extremists like Yahya Sinwar. And now Yahya Sinwar...
What does Israel get out of that, tactically or strategically?
Because, we have to acknowledge the geopolitical circumstance as it stands today. Netanyahu is deeply unpopular in Israel, will almost certainly lose an election if it's called right now. He knows that. Everyone is aware of that. That is why a lot of Israelis are frustrated with Netanyahu for not getting the hostages back home for his own political ambitions. So the only way that the election would be called now is if the far right-wing Ben-Gvir and Smotrich pull out of the government. The only way that they would pull out of the government is if there's a ceasefire. And they have said that very clearly on the record. They have said if there's a ceasefire, we're going to end this government and Netanyahu will lose probably this time forever. So Netanyahu has every incentive to kill the moderates inside Hamas so that the extremists take over. And he goes, oh, well, golly, gee, now I double can't get to a peace deal.
Okay, let me take the question also to you, Mosab, about Sinwar taking over. Does that change the calculation in any way for you?
Look, there is no difference between Sinwar and Haniyeh. They are both complicit in the crime. Both of them have blood on their hands. Both of them sacrificed children as a strategy to gain power. And they couldn't be more careless about the future of the Palestinian children. And I think both leaders must be brought to justice. And if it's not possible, and there is no way around it, then killing them is a virtue. Killing them, in fact, is a day of celebration because we know that heads of evil are being removed from power. Now, for those who dare to question Israel without addressing this evil practice of sacrificing children done by Haniyeh and Sinwar and all the Palestinian ideologists throughout the century, by the way. If they haven't already condemned this culture that targets children and put them in harm's way, then they don't have the authority to question what Israel is doing. If they want to question what Israel is doing, they first must address this evil practice. Otherwise, they are hypocrites and they just pose as they are standing on a high moral ground and they have the authority to question people and label this person this and that person that. This is not how it works. If you want to be truthful, then you have to be truthful all the way.
All right, we're going to take a break. I just want to say to those of you who are listening, there are many, many more debates that we've got on our website. Not all of them reach this level of intensity, but some of them do. But all of them end up shedding light, as I feel this one is as well. Recent topics we've taken on include: should Biden step down? Is wokeness killing comedy? Is the two-state solution still viable? All of that and more is at opentodebate.org. This is Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan. The question we're taking on: can Israel make peace with Hamas? Our guests are Cenk Uygur and Mosab Hassan Yousef. Say that again, and Mosab Hassan Yousef. What we like to do in our debates at this point is ask for people who are experts in the topic or following the topic to also submit questions that I'll read to you, and some of them have given a lot of thought to these. The first one I want to bring in It comes from Nicole Narea, who is a senior politics reporter at Vox, who has covered the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict extensively and helped lead the organization's coverage of the Gaza war. Her question is this: the kind of regional escalation many experts warned of is now here. In the wake of the recent assassinations of top Hamas and Hezbollah leaders, Hezbollah and its Iranian allies are expected to retaliate harshly. The U.S. is moving military assets to the Middle East in preparation. Full-scale war appears possible. Will that force Israel to turn its attention away from Hamas in Gaza, if only because it faces a more pressing threat along its northern border with Lebanon? To what extent might that force Netanyahu's hand in accepting a Gaza ceasefire deal and shift Israeli public opinion on continuing the war in Gaza? Would you like to take that first?
Sure. Nothing's going to force Netanyahu to take a ceasefire deal, because if he does, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich leave the government. He loses power. He doesn't care about the Israeli people. He obviously doesn't care about the hostages. My God, he has no concern at all for the Palestinians or the giant war he's trying to start in the Middle East. He has no concern for the Americans who have to pay for it in both blood and treasure for the wars he's starting. All he cares about is me, me, me. And that's why 72% of Israelis say that he should leave, and he's deeply unpopular. And so that's why I say never say that all Israelis are this way or that way. Like any nation, there's great variety. And right now, like a lot of nations, they're like, we did not like Dick Cheney and George Bush when they executed the Iraq War. A lot of Israelis don't like Netanyahu. Is he agitating for more war? Of course. He bombed Tehran, Beirut, and Damascus. How much more of a warmonger can you be? So, I mean, you talk about sacrificing children. I keep saying I can't stand that 34 kids were killed in Israel. I can't stand that over 15,000 kids have been killed in the Palestinian areas. But how could you possibly say, can you believe Hamas killed those kids? But you won't say, can you believe Netanyahu killed the Palestinian kids? So many more, a stadium full of kids. Isn't that enough? Is anything ever enough? No. It's all Hamas's fault. They made us kill them. They made us do this. We're never going to get to peace with them because they're the violent ones. Well, when you kill 35 times as many civilians as they did, you don't get to say that they're the violent ones because you're 30 times as violent. But I'm never going to hold that against the Israeli people. I just want to get the peace so we can have two beautiful nations. We've got to get there. And the way to get there is not more war. It's more peace.
Do you want me to repeat the question, or do you want to respond to Cenk's response?
Well, I think you're just a hypocrite.
Okay, now you're getting personal.
And I think, yes, I am personal.
Well, let's not call each other hypocrites or other names, okay?
You have children.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to choose between your two children and other people's children, what do you choose? If you had no choice.
But you do have a choice. You have no choice but to murder 15,000 kids?
Their children or your children, what would you choose?
I'm stepping in again because we're getting to very rhetorically obvious questions that are not helping people understand the issue that's here.
Because he cannot answer this question. Because if it comes to him and his family, then it's a different business.
So you would kill 15,000 other kids just to save your kids?
Let's cool it, please.
I don't have
you
children.
Would. Say you would.
This is a question to you. What would you do?
Shall we cut the mics?
I would not kill a school full of children.
Let's stop.
If you had to choose between your children and the rest of the world, what do you choose?
Mosab, please stop. Take this question, please. It comes from Barbara Slavin, who is a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center. She's debated with us twice at Open to Debate. Her question is, if Hamas were to accept Israel's right to exist in internationally recognized borders and forswears continuing violence, would Israel then accept Hamas as part of a Palestinian unity government? And I want to ask this question in the framework of my own experience. I covered Israel, I covered the PLO in the 1980s and the 1990s. I saw the PLO come a long way, and Israel come a long way. At the time when Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister and Yasser Arafat was the chairman of the PLO, from a time when they were talking as they are now, that it would be just impossible for them to make peace because of the legacy of pain each had inflicted on one another, it did seem totally impossible that they could ever find a way to talk to each other. I granted there was not the religious dimension to this. It was more nationalism, as you said earlier. But having witnessed this movement from the totally not possible to the for a while possible solution, reminds me of this question. If Hamas were to come to a point of accepting Israel's right to exist and forswear violence, could Israel at the same time include Hamas? Or is there too much blood already spilled to make something like that possible?
Whatever Hamas says today, whatever they do is too late.
Too late.
They had the opportunity for 36 years to recognize Israel's right to exist, and Israel tried many times to negotiate with Hamas. And the condition was very clear, that you drop your violence, and then after that we are able to sit on the negotiating table. But Hamas refused to accept Israel's right to exist in principle. So if Hamas comes today, after October 7, after destroying Gaza, after using Gazans as human shields, this is a crime. Even if Israel forgives this crime, I will never forgive Hamas for killing and sacrificing Gaza children for their political gain.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter whether Israel or the international community would validate Hamas and reward them with anything. I will always oppose Hamas. I will never forget what they did to the Arab and Jewish children in the region.
So I want to take a piece of that response back to you, Cenk, but I have one request. I feel you might be getting more airtime than your opponent, and so I want to ask you to be a little bit more terse, because in matter of fairness, fundamentally, Mosab said, in the case of Hamas, it's too late. They've been given the chance over and over again, chance to be flexible. They've shown no flexibility. Very recently, they showed the opposite of flexibility. In the case of Hamas, it's too late.
Yeah, so again, I'm sorry, but nonsense. Number one, Hamas has accepted the ceasefire, Israel hasn't. So Israel has killed way more than Hamas has. So under that logic, again, we can never talk to Israel. What an absurd way to think. Second of all,
absurd is one of those trigger words that is sounding a little bit personal.
Okay, but I mean, I don't know what you, like, how do I address the fact that you say, okay, I don't want to negotiate with my enemies. I'd like to negotiate with what? Puff the Magic Dragon? Norway? Well, who are we negotiating with if we're not negotiating with our enemies? And this idea that, they're uniquely crazy.
But I think...
Hold on, I got to say this. So oh my God, they hate us for who we are. You know, the Greeks and the Armenians hated the Turks, hated us. And I don't blame them. We occupied them. Of course they hated us. What were they going to do? Love us? And then, you know what they did? They rebelled against the Ottoman Empire and said, you have no right to exist. Well, it's true, the Ottoman Empire didn't necessarily have to exist. But if we could have said, how dare you? You're saying we don't have a right to exist, and you hate us. Okay. We're going to occupy you forever.
I'm cognizant of the time again. So, yeah, please do.
Okay. Hamas on October 7 committed a genocide against the Jewish people. Then immediately took hostages to force Israel to declare defeat and surrender on October 8th. This is Hamas' strategy. Because they knew when they take hostages, Israel would have no choice but to come to the negotiating table broken and give Hamas recognition as a counterpart. This is why they took the hostages. And today, we have all the hypocrites around the world saying ceasefire now. They don't understand that by doing so, they are giving Hamas victory, and they are forcing Israel to declare defeat. And this is the most dangerous thing that is happening about ceasefire. It's not a war that Israel chooses to do. Israel is trying to end the war that Hamas started. And when we force Israel, it's Israel's choice, actually, to decide to sit on the negotiating table or not. It's not up to him. It's not up to anyone else to actually force Israel to stop their war, to end a radical, savage group and give them legitimacy and keep them in power. So with that said, it's not up to anyone to force Israel to sit on the negotiating table. If the harm was against him, his people, or his own children, he wouldn't negotiate.
I just told you I would.
Over the life of your children?
I want to bring in an Israeli voice to this conversation in the form of a question from Einat Wilf. Einat is a former member of the Israeli Knesset and actually debated with us in the past as well. And I'll take this question to you, Cenk, because it echoes very much what Mosab is saying. She asks, given that Hamas remains deeply and violently committed to the fundamental Palestinian ethos of no sovereign state for the Jewish people in any part of the land, manifested in the declared demand to exercise a non-existent right to settle inside Israel's sovereign territory in the name of return, what exactly makes you think there is room for a negotiated agreement, assuming that Israel's own red line is to maintain and protect its very existence as the sovereign state of the Jewish people? And you have already stipulated that you are a supporter of the existence of Israel, so that's not the challenge here. The question is, why would they want to negotiate for that when she feels that that is fundamentally at risk?
Yeah, this is the same arguments they always make. Why should we negotiate? Oh, those guys are evil, uniquely evil. We kill way more than them. We've occupied them for 57 years. We've oppressed them for 57 years. But they're uniquely evil. And by the way, let's acknowledge the huge amount of racism in that. The Muslims and the Arabs and the Palestinians are unique savages. They're not part of civilization, as Netanyahu said in the speech to Congress. So you can't trust these people. They're naturally violent, they say, as they drop 2,000-pound bombs on their children. So I don't think either side is naturally violent. That's racist, anti-Semitic, bigoted. It's absurd. You get to peace through negotiation. So according to her logic, okay, the African National Congress used to do violence in apartheid South Africa. Well, that's it. These brutish savages and like Nelson Mandela, you can never get to peace with them. Well, it turns out you could get to peace with them if you tried. They didn't want to get to peace with them until there was economic consequences, and that was because of the boycotts. We should do the same exact thing to Israel. America should cut off all funding. We're supporting a brutal occupation, the giant oppression of 5.5 million people, the deaths of 40,000 people, and then they turn around and claim the Palestinians are violent? It's disgusting, it's offensive, and it's counter-rational. It's not even close to rational.
I'm cutting in because you've made that point before. I just want to let
Have you ever been to Gaza, by the way?
No, because I would probably be murdered by the IDF.
Why would you be murdered?
They put my name on one of their bombs. They murdered journalists more than all other nations combined
20, 30 years ago, that was also the case. If you've never been there, you don't even know the people. You need to live with the people for at least 10 years to understand who they are before you represent them. You're representing people that you don't know. I was born there, and I don't need to represent their ideology. But at the end of the day, they are Arabs. My mother is an Arab. My father is an Arab. And they are lost cause because they are believing of foreign ideologies. And this is what I'm trying to emancipate my people by asking them to drop their sick ideology so they can be themselves.
Let me come in on that very point. To what extent would you say that the people who live in Gaza and the people who live on the West Bank are supporting Hamas now? And do they, in fact, seek peace with Israel? And I know everybody's different, and it's I'm asking a general question.
Listen,
but in general,
the vast majority of what's so-called Palestinians in the territories, whether in the West Bank or Gaza, the vast majority of the Muslim world have been supporting Hamas. And the reason, not because they know what Hamas is, not because they understand Hamas ideology. The reason, it's because of their anti-Semitic approach, because of their hatred of the Jewish people, and they found their angry cause to launch a global assault against this most productive ethnic group that they have contributed so much to life. And they did not start this war, and they haven't oppressing what's so-called Palestinian people. The Palestinian people have been inflicting self-pain for 70 years.
So if Hamas were to be defeated or disappear or something absurd like they resign, the bulk of the Palestinian population would still be at war with Israel or still be willing to be at war with Israel?
Listen, prior to the first Palestinian Intifada, we did not have a problem. There was no one checkpoint. We were able to go and dine in Tel Aviv. The Jewish people were able to come to Ramallah, to Gaza, shop. I have memories of Jewish families coming to our house, and my father was serving them dinner. We did not have a problem. There was no wall. We were able to travel abroad until the moment Yasser Arafat brought his sick ideology and started the Intifada. This is when everything went wrong.
That's not answering my question about, you're talking about the leadership again, and I'm asking about the common
But yeah, I'm
person.
giving you an example that it is possible. Arabs and Jews
So
can
yes.
get along. Definitely.
Okay.
Arabs and Jews can get along, but Palestinian ideologists, this is something that does not have any limitations, and it's an anarchy without a moral compass. Nothing can satisfy it.
I have one more question I was going to get to. We won't have time if you want to respond to what was just said instead.
Yeah, so this idea of like this awful ideology. So I can't stand the fundamentalist of all religions. And so I don't like Muslim fundamentalist ideology, Christian or Jewish or Buddhist even. The settlers have a Jewish fundamentalist ideology that they are the chosen people, that God gave them that land, and they should drive the Palestinians and ethnically cleanse them from those lands. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get to peace with them. That doesn't mean I want to kill them all. That doesn't mean that we should have permanent war. I think they're lunatics, but I also think the fundamentalists of all sides are lunatics. They believe that they're talking to an invisible person, and that invisible person is telling them to kill everyone. So nevertheless, the way to peace is not through killing, it is through settling your disagreements through diplomacy. So look, this idea that they have that the only way we'll ever get to a peace deal is if Hamas is all killed. And by the way, the next group that comes up that resists occupation, all killed, everybody's all killed. And then they have to come and say, we love the Jews and we love Israel. And there's not a single person who resists you, and grovel and grovel and grovel.
I don't really think, in fairness, that Mosab is saying.
No, I think that's exactly what he's saying. Give me a standard. Give me a standard. At what point do the Palestinians say, have we been peaceful enough? There's giant stretches of time where there's no violence.
We saw with the
No.
PLO that they didn't have to grovel and grovel and grovel. There was a quid pro quo. There was recognition.
First, I do not. There's only one peace deal that was offered by Israel that was pretty good. The rest are total mythology. That whole thing about Clinton and Arafat, even our own negotiators said, no, it was a terrible deal that Israel offered. And then they said, oh, we offered a deal. We offered a deal. Okay. Anybody can offer a horrible deal. But I will say in 2008, Ehud Omer actually offered a pretty good deal. I thought Mahmoud Abbas should have taken it. Now, I hate that he didn't take it. Maybe we could have had a Palestinian state there. You have to look at the deals individually. Do they make sense? Are they fair? But they didn't take the deal. That doesn't mean that we should occupy them for the rest of time.
Cenk, time on this one.
But
and this is your last word in this section.
At least he's admitting that at least once in the history of this conflict, that what so-called Palestinians had an opportunity and they missed it. But I tell him the truth, that the Palestinians or the Arabs had so many opportunities. Because back in 1948, when the Jews declared their independence, the Arabs had equal opportunity to declare their independence. But instead of declaring their independence, they declared war against the Jewish people.
It's absurd.
It is not absurd. It's
a
fact.
All right, I'm calling a wrap on this round.
Then give me half your house. Give me half your house.
I'm calling a wrap.
Give it to me.
Come
Give
on,
it to me right now.
Cenk, come on.
Give me half your house.
Cool, please, everybody. We're gonna
go. He didn't accept it. I'm going to take the whole house.
We're going to go to our closing round, and in our closing round, each debater has 2 minutes to make their point one more time. Cenk, you're up first in that. One more time to tell us why you're answering yes to the question, can Israel make peace with Hamas?
Yes. So first of all, the only way that you're going to get to a safe haven for Jews, which is what I want, I have Jewish family, I have Jewish friends, is to make a peace deal. Permanent war is never going to get you the dream of Israel. And by the way, of course, in a negotiation, the Palestinians have to give up things as well, including right of return. So if you're a Palestinian, that breaks your heart. I love you, but you've got to compromise. Both sides have to compromise. Has this been done before? Not only has it been done throughout history, thousands of times, Israel did it with Egypt, and they got a great result. They did it with Jordan. They got a great result. So why wouldn't you do the thing that worked instead of something that hasn't worked in 57 years, that hasn't worked in 70 years? The constant occupation. What do you think people that are occupied are going to do? Do you think they're just going to accept it and go, yes, we will be occupied forever. We will never, ever resist you? Of course they're going to fight back. As a Turk, I know this. The Greeks fought back. They had every right to fight back. The Armenians fought back. They had every right to fight back. They thought we shouldn't exist. They hated us. Why did they hate us? Not because we're Turks. We could have gone with that excuse. No, they hated us because we were occupying them. That's so obvious. The only way that you don't see it is if you're blinded by rage and cultural bias. I'm trying to snap you out of it because I've seen it with my Turkish relatives, and I've seen it in every ethnicity. It isn't about Jews or Muslims. When you get dug into a position, you think the other side is so evil, you can't even talk to them. But if you do that, then you're never going to get the thing that you want most of all, which is a safe haven for Jews and a beautiful, loving Israel and a beautiful, loving Palestine. You get there through peace. You will literally never get there through war. And by the way, you will be the most hated nation on earth because you're going to say, no, my only other option is I occupy them and oppress them for the rest of time. Why would you want to be one of the most hated nations on earth? Give them the freedom that you got. Let them get the state just like Israel did, and let's have peace together.
And Mosab, you get the last word. Your closing, please.
Wow. The entire foundation of this conflict is based on a false narrative. And the false narrative begins with Palestine. The most important question of this century, of our time, that we need to answer, everyone needs to answer. What is Palestine? We need to find out where did that originate from, and the Palestinian ideology, what it really means, what can satisfy it. And if the Arabs have been hijacked by the what's so-called Palestinian cause, the moment we are able to find the origins of this conflict, then we will find the answers. I don't think Israel has a problem with the Arabs as an ethnic group. I think Arabs, Jews, Persians in the region, then they can get along. The Jewish people can get along in every country. We have them all over the world. They are non-violent people, and they are very creative, contributing to life in every field. Now, the Arabs and the Jews can get along because we have a model that is successful in Israel. The Arabs in Israel are a very important part of the state. They are citizens of the state of Israel. They serve in the army. They are part of the social fabric. And this is a living example that Arabs and Jews can get along. But now, the Palestinian ideology, this is delusional. It's a very dangerous, violent ideology that kept developing to a very dangerous state. And today is the time for the world to question this ideology. What do they want? What's their agenda? What's their ultimate goal? Is it to build a Palestinian state, or is it to destroy the state of Israel? If we are able to answer these questions, then we may be able to provide a solution soon, hopefully, for this endless conflict.
Thank you. And that is a wrap on this debate. I want to thank both of our debaters, Cenk Uygur and Mosab Hassan Yousef, for taking part. There was a lot of passion and impassionate speech that passed between the two of you, but the fact that each of you stayed and sat there and listened to each other and made eye contact, I got to say that in itself, in the nature of this conversation, is sometimes more than we're seeing from a lot of other people. So I appreciate what both of you did for doing that. And I want to thank all of you who are tuning into the program and to let you know that, once again, that we're a nonprofit that is working to combat extreme polarization through civil debate. And our work is made possible by listeners like you, by the Rosencrantz Foundation, and by supporters of Open to Debate. Robert Rosencrantz is our chairman. Our CEO is Clay O'Connor. Leo Matthau is our Chief Content Officer. Elizabeth Kitzenberg is our Chief Advancement Officer. This episode was produced by Alexis Pangrazia and Marlette Sandoval. Editorial and research by Gabriella Mayer and Andrew Foote. Andrew Lipson and Max Fulton provided production support. The Open to Debate team also includes Eric Gross, Gabrielle Iannicelli, Rachel Kemp, and Linda Lee. Damon Whittemore mixed this episode. Our theme music is by Alex Clement. I'm John Donvan. We'll see you next time on Open to Debate.